Good evening, everybody. 33 years and 31 days, day 16, over halfway through now. My wife said to me this evening as I suddenly got an alert on my phone to tell me that I was half an hour away from the broadcast, and I went, I've got to do that thing. And she said, it sounds like you're not enjoying it. And I said, no, actually, I am enjoying it, but I was so settled in what I was doing that I thought, I don't want to. I'm doing it. I'm here. Good evening, everybody. I've seen Jenny, I've seen Andrea. There's 20 or 25 people in the room at the minute, so I can't see who everybody is, but we've got Ive, we've got Lord Exminster, we've got iTabs Peter. Just let me just double check on all destinations, see where everybody is. Most people appear to be on Periscope, Twitter with me. So good evening. Welcome along. Day 16, looking at 2005. So those of you that were with me yesterday will know that in 2004, child number 2 arrived. So we had a lot on our plate. And also, we had a situation where I was still driving 36 miles to work and 36 miles back every shift. Every time I was on duty, I was doing that. And it was a bind when I applied to Cheshire in 2001, and they rejected me. It was even more of a bind now. Finances were stretched tight as a drum. It was difficult. I had to reduce costs somehow. And as I said yesterday, I rang Cheshire Police and thought they're just going to say, they actually snatched my hand off. They had an application form with me in no time at all. I filled that in and the application went in and the process started. Now then, if you remember all the way back to 1989, which was the very, very first broadcast where we did those 3 years as a special, you'll know and remember that I applied to join GMP as soon as I'd completed 12 months as a special constable, and GMP rejected me. You'll also know that Cheshire, when I applied to them, rejected me. Common theme starting to appear. I never get anything first time. I have to fight for it. So I apply for Cheshire second time round and think, they want me. They're keen to get transferees. I should be all right here. February 2005, letter arrives on the doormat. Your application is rejected. This time, unlike in 2001, where I thought, you know what, maybe the better the devil I know and all the rest of it, this time I got the bit between my teeth and challenged it. Rang him up, said, what the heck are you talking about? This letter says that I've been rejected on my sickness record. I said, and my sickness record is fine. And they looked at it and they said, no, there's a 3-4 week period here where you were off and it just falls within the catchment period, so your sickness isn't good enough. It's not good enough, so we're not having it. So I queried it and I looked at the information that was available, that I knew, and I said, well, wait a minute, that 4 week period of there? And he said, yeah. I said, well, I understood that injuries on duty weren't part of the calculation when it came to determining how much sickness you'd had. And they said, well, and they replied and said, well, yeah, on the telephone, they said, well, that's not an injury on duty. So I said, well, strangely enough, I said, the injuries that I had came about because I was involved in a collision in a police vehicle where somebody pulled right across in front of me and I T-boned them in a traffic car at about 35 miles an hour. So I said, so I would argue that that's an injury on duty. Oh, well, GMP didn't tell us that. What began there was a long, drawn-out procedure where GMP eventually confirmed that it was an injury on duty. And I did get a letter from Cheshire Police saying, your application is reinstated. We'll be in touch. So I'll wait. Now, during this time, those of you, again, will remember from sort of 1995 sort of time, something like that, I sat the sergeant's exam. I didn't embarrass myself, but I didn't pass. And there was a lot of conversation going on around about this time, 2004, 2005, because 30 years previously, there'd been a huge change to policing, and there was a massive surge in police numbers and a big recruitment drive. And all those people were coming up towards retirement. There was a big lump of cops that were going to be leaving the organisation. And the theory and the rationale behind that, if you want to get promoted, now's the time to do it. So I put myself forward, got myself started studying. So I've got two kids, wife, dogs, home, no money, driving to Manchester and back every single day. I began to study. I shook myself away and became this nobody in the house. All I did was in my spare time was study and read and come down, get a cup of coffee, chat for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, go back up, study again, do questions. It was relentless. But I did it. I worked my way through it. I would add that on the traffic unit at the time at Manchester, my sergeant was a guy called John Armfield. And he was, for many people, he was Marmite. You loved him or you hated him. He had a reputation for being hard and putting people under pressure. And occasionally he got right under my skin. But throughout my promotion process and throughout my time of studying and learning and getting through that stuff, he was a godsend because he was on my case all the time. Come on, what about that? Well, what about that? And have you thought about such and such? What would the ramifications be if they did that and that and that? What offence would they have committed? He was brilliant, really kicked me up the pants and kept pushing and motivating and driving me towards thinking about exam questions and study all the time. I think maybe I would have got there anyway, but he was definitely behind, pushing me all the time. Very grateful to him over that period of time. The application process with Cheshire is ongoing. And eventually, I get the letter that says, I went for an interview. I went for an interview at Cheshire headquarters at Winsford. And then I got a letter that said, congratulations, you're in. We'll be in touch. There'll be a transfer date. Da, 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 da. I sat OSPRE exam part 1 and passed it. Happy days. Really, really good. Interesting little anecdote, just to bring it back a little bit from that. Whilst the application had been reinstated and before I was interviewed and accepted, we had an incident in the back garden here where the fox hunt, the hunt, came in and through the back garden. I was looking out the window. It was lunchtime. I'd got a poorly wife, a daughter that I was trying to feed, and all sorts. And there's a fox in the back garden. I'm like, what? Why is there a fox in the back garden? It comes in the back garden, does a complete about face, and goes straight back out the way it came. A few minutes later, I can hear dogs whining and the noise, and I think there's something wrong with one of my dogs. My dogs are in the back garden. I go out, what's the matter with you, last bit? Nothing. Suddenly, I see hounds coming in at the back of next door's garden, which is quite high up. I can see hounds coming into the garden. One of my dogs was a scrapper, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a nightmare, because if they come in my garden and he starts fighting, they're a pack mentality, he'll get absolutely shredded. I was petrified something was going to happen. Panic, grabbed my dogs, got the dogs inside, shut the door, and then had hounds all over the garden. They leapt all over next door's garden. They punctured the pond liner. They demolished the fence, several fence panels between us and next door, trampled all over the garden. I had to open the gate at the side and let them all out into the street. There was nobody seemingly in control of these dogs at all. I climbed up through the garden and out into the next street at the back, and found somebody on a horse and quite frankly gave them a pretty serious piece of my mind. To cut a very long story short, they came, they put the fence right, they fixed next door's pond, they paid for everything and put it all straight. But that had happened sometime before. And when I just thought, I'll just Google my name and see what comes up, because Cheshire Police will no doubt do an online vet and look at things that talk about me online. Google Neil Jewson Smith. What comes up? Hit number 1, the Hunt Saboteurs Association. Because basically I'd been in the newspaper pointing at my fence and snarling about how they damaged all my property. But the Hunt Sabs had picked it up and shared it on their website, and that was the first hit. I thought, oh God, they're going to reject me because they'll think I'm linked to the Hunt Sabs. Anyway, back to where we were. Application reinstated. All underway. They told me that I'm going to get in and there's just going to be a transfer date. I've got my sergeant on the traffic unit, John Armfield, kicking me up the backside to keep going with my exams and my studies. And I passed part 1. I passed part 1. So then I have to wait for part 2, and I start practicing for part 2, and I start doing role plays with people that I know at work. And I also go and pay to go on a course to learn how to pass part 2, run by a PC that used to be that was a Manchester PC, and it was a sideline that he did. And to be fair, he got me through that. He got me through that because he told me, I learned, in many regards, I learned how to play the system and how to say what they want to hear from you. And that's a big beef that I have with police promotion processes. It doesn't promote the people who are skilled and dedicated and have got the right leadership mentality. What it promotes is people who A, can pass exams, and B, can sit in a role play and spin a load of bullshit, basically, because that's what they want to hear. And it really grated on me, but it worked. And so anyway, doing all that practicing, and at the very beginning of September in 2005. The last 2 weeks in Greater Manchester Police were probably the most fun I had in my time on traffic, because the lads that I work with knew that I'm going. So I'm still on patrol. I'm still doing the jobs. I'm still responding to the radio and running around everywhere. We get to a collision and you'd all be there sorting everything out. And then one of them would say, they'd look at me because I've been there first and started getting the ball rolling, getting things sorted out. And then they look at me and go, there's no point in you picking this up, is there? Because I'll just get it myself in 2 weeks. I might as well do it because all my workload would just be passed to other people. So I didn't pick up any paperwork in the last 2 weeks. I didn't pick up any collisions. I just ran around everywhere to bumps, helped out, did blood transfusion runs, sorted all sorts of things out, and had a great time all over the division, but without picking up any actual paperwork. Had a great time, finished towards the end of August, and then the beginning of September, can't remember the day, I think it was like the 4th or the 5th, something like that. I transferred in to Cheshire. Monday morning, Force headquarters, turn up, 9 o'clock, first day. Late. I went round the back lanes to try and get there, got stuck, something happened. I rolled through the door about 15 minutes late, got to reception, panicking like that. PC comes down and says, "Hiya, it's all right, don't worry about it. We've gone upstairs, but it's fine." I don't know. Takes me upstairs, sits in this classroom, and actually, while I'm doing that, I forgot there's a photograph that I can show you from this. Just let me find the photograph. Need to look at these as icons because I've not named it properly. So go into a class with a bunch of transferees. There's this photograph. Oh, that's because I'm not in the right folder. Desktop. 31 days. There it is. Picture. There. Okay, let's move that over there. Bring that back here. This is because I was a little late online tonight, so I hadn't planned. And bingo! There we go. 2005, joined Cheshire Police. And we're there, first day, meeting, and we sat there, and that fella in the middle at the front came in. He came in, we were all transferees, every one of us in this room, and he came in his shirt sleeves, without a tie, sat down and chatted to us. And he chatted to us for about 45 minutes. And after 45 minutes, he left the room. I was utterly, utterly speechless, because, to be quite fair, I had never, ever met a senior officer like him. He spoke openly, he spoke passionately, he spoke truthfully, and was so laid back and down to earth. It was unbelievable. Having come from GMP, where all you ever did was get shoved out of the nick when somebody from headquarters was coming, get out, don't come back until 5 o'clock. Just get out and disappear, don't come back. And the chiefs would walk around the police stations that were pristinely tidy and like the Queen smelling of fresh paint. It was maybe not quite that bad, but you just got shoved out of the way. So you never had any contact with senior officers of that rank at all. And Peter Fahey came in, sat down, and immediately impressed me. And I was just, blimey, I'm in a different world here. What is all this? So an amazing difference. Now, here was the thing. This is the one thing where I think Cheshire Police really let themselves down and really let me down. And that was because I came into Cheshire Police as a fully skilled, totally competent traffic officer, armed to the teeth with qualifications and skills and abilities within the roads policing network. I had massive P&C authorities, which are national systems. They refused all my P&C access initially, and they put me nowhere near traffic. They took all those skills that I had and everything that I was about and went, put it over there, and they put me on something called Custody Investigation Team. And the Custody Investigation Team was a team of cops who interviewed prisoners in custody for minor low-level offences. And this was all to do with Mr. Fahey's new project. And he's had a bunch of cops called TPT, Targeted Patrol Team, and all they did was go from job to job to job, deal, and come away. If they locked up and had a prisoner from a job, they would take the prisoner to custody. They would do a handover file to say, I did this, I did that, I went there. Here's the statement from the shop, shoplifter. There's a statement from the store assistant. There's my statement saying they arrested him. Boom, hand it over, nothing else. Custody Investigation Team would then deal with that prisoner. Interview, charge, fingerprint, photograph, process, put before the court, do the file, everything. That's what we did. In some regards, it took me back to a lot of work that I'd long since put behind me. Maybe did me good for the promotion process, I'm not sure. But as far as my skill set was concerned, Cheshire Police sold me down the river because I didn't fit with where they wanted me to be. And the Custody Investigation Team was somewhere where nobody wanted to be. So I was a transferee, I got the shit job, and take it or leave it. You chose to come here, mate. and I couldn't argue with that, I suppose. The TPT process actually, on paper, looked really good. In later years, as time went on, I came to realize that it was a pile of nonsense, because what it was doing is it was de-skilling officers. Officers, we had a spell later in a couple of years where I was promoted and I was working in custody as a sergeant, that we started to get a lot of lockout prisoners. Lockout prisoners are where the prisons can't accept people because they're full. So they end up getting locked out of prison, and the police service then provides a backup and puts people into police cells and keeps them there. They operate under different rules because they're Her Majesty's prison prisoners, not police prisoners, so they've got different rules and different things. But we'd end up looking after them. And occasionally, if we didn't have anybody but we had staff on, or if we only had a couple and we had staff on, the superintendent in charge of custody would say, well, we can speed up the process of some of these prisoners by using the staff that are on lockout that are really supernumerary to what they actually need. And we had so many cops who'd say, well, I don't know what to do. I've never interviewed a prisoner properly, and I don't know how to build a file. And the look of horror on their faces, because suddenly they were being thrown into something that should be bread and butter to them, but because of the organisational structure that had been created that they'd fall into, they sort of fell into, was that they never had to do that. So they never got any skill or experience in it, never learned how to do it. And to be quite frank, the quality of some of the arrests they were making was something appalling. And it was because it didn't matter. They didn't have to deal with it. So they just, oh, I'll just lock you up then, and somebody else can sort out all that big smelly ball of horribleness because I'm going to another job. So it was dead easy, but they were de-skilled and they didn't learn stuff. And it was just, in that regard, a total and utter abject failure. But anyway, I transferred to Cheshire. I'm still driving to Manchester. And the reason I'm still driving to Manchester occasionally, some 2 times a week perhaps, is because 2 PCs, keep doing that, 2 PCs in Manchester that I knew well, who were also going through the process, and we were doing role plays with one another. So I'd go down and meet them at 6:30 perhaps on a Thursday night and say, right, we'd sit in a room at Elizabeth Slinger Road and we would do role plays for an hour and a half, and then I'd drive home. And we were practicing, and we were learning, and we were developing. So I sat part 1 and passed in Manchester, transferred to Cheshire, and while I was in Cheshire, I think in December in 2005, I drove to Bradford and was at a hotel in Bradford and did my part 2. Nerve-wracking, but did it, got through it. And ultimately, more of that will come tomorrow, but I actually sat the part 2 in December. It wasn't until 2006 where I knew what had happened. But there we go. So I've passed part 1, application rejected, application reinstated, late on my first day, meet Mr. Fye, despite the TPT thing. And I think sometimes you have to try these things to see if they work. I don't know whether he'd ever accept it as being an abject failure, as I would describe it. Maybe not. I don't know. But for me, it was a total and utter disaster. I lived with the fact that they just cast all my skills and abilities to one side and didn't capitalize on that at all, which was immensely disappointing. But I got over that, and my career moved on in a different direction. I often look back and think, if I was still in GMP, what would I be doing? Traffic. I would still be in traffic. There's a whole, it used to always be that if you went into a specialist department, the minute you got promoted, you went back to section, and you had to get back to your specialist department if that's what you wanted to do. You always came back to section. As the years went on, they realized that actually you're a detective constable with masses of experience of working in CID. And you know what? We're going to capitalize on those skills and just promote you within the department. So you're going to become a detective sergeant straight away. Neil's a traffic cop, knows traffic policing upside down, inside out, back to front. We're going to promote him within the traffic department. So would I still be in traffic? Yes, I would. Would I be promoted? Most likely. How far would I have gone? Who knows? But ultimately, would I still be involved with road policing? Yes, I would, because it was bread and butter and I loved it. And they'd have to drag me kicking and screaming out of roads policing. But I made a decision for me, I made a decision for my family, and I moved away and brought myself closer to home, which was a really good thing to do. So I walked out the door at JMP after more or less 15 years, 14 and a half years full-time service, and joined Cheshire. And that's where I've been right until the end. But there we go. That's all for 2005. We'll see what happens with part 2 of the exam and what happened with that tomorrow as we look towards that, and then how my career started to develop then in Cheshire and took on a completely different path. But that's for tomorrow. So thank you for dropping in. Replay viewers, if you got this far, thank you for staying with us. Jenny, Ivy, Peter, Andrea, everybody that's in here now and been here from the start, thank you for sticking with me. I don't know quite how you do it, but thank you. Hope to see you tomorrow. Until then, wherever you are, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.